Join us today, but this will be recorded. So I'll turn things over to Alexa and your group to get us started.
Thanks, Tara. I'm going to share my screen just so everybody can see. Okay. Oh, I always do that. I hit the wrong button. Okay. So we titled this Explore Cafe, what do you think of when you hear the phrase soup kitchen? Just because that's a phrase that we feel is thrown around a lot with not a lot of context put behind it. So we're just going to do introductions of the PHEED Philadelphia coordinators and then what PHEED Philadelphia is. So I'm Alexa. I am a junior. My major is psychology, and I have minors in LGU, public health, and religion. So that's me.
Hi everyone, I'm Kate. I'm also a junior and I am a nursing major.
Hi everybody, I'm Grace. I am also a junior and I am a marketing and business systems and analytics major.
Hi, I'm Gabby. I'm a senior accounting major.
Hi, I'm Cassidy. I'm a senior in the 5-year Communication Sciences and Disorders program with a minor in psychology.
Hi, I'm Jessie. I'm a sophomore. I'm a communication major and newly an LGU minor.
Okay, so I'm just gonna introduce what PHEED Philly is for those of us who don't know. So PHEED Philly is a student-run organization. We focus on food insecurity and hunger, not just at LaSalle, but also in the Philadelphia area. We have 2 service sites that, pre-COVID we were visiting regularly. One was Blessed Sarnelli House in Kensington, and the other was Face to Face Germantown. So the way we like to describe them, Sarnelli is what your typical community kitchen will look like. It is run by 1 or 2 volunteers. It is in out of a traditional row house in Kensington. And then Face to Face is right over in Germantown, 5 minutes away. It is more of a dining experience, and they have a lot of other services for their residents, which, Alexa, if you want to go to the next slide. We actually have 2 of the volunteers from Face to Face joining us here. That is Becky Mesa. She is our volunteer coordinator, and Tara Moynihan, who is the director of programs.
So just to get started with a brief definition of what food insecurity actually is, it's defined as the lack of access to enough quality food for an active and healthy lifestyle. It currently affects 11.1% of the entire US population, which equates to about 1 in 9 individuals. This affects really anyone, regardless of age, gender, race, and/or socioeconomic status. And there can be both short-term effects such as stress and also long-term effects such as learning problems with small children. So then hunger is defined as more of a physical feeling. I'm sure many of you have felt hungry before, but in 2017, 40 million people were struggling with hunger. And then due to COVID, it's now increased to more than 50 million people in 2020. And I'm sure, in your local areas, you have seen all your local food banks asking for an increase in food donations. I also thought this was an interesting fact. Up to 2/3 of people facing hunger have incomes above the poverty line. I know a lot of times the poverty line is the only measure that we look at, but I think it's also really important just to look at food insecurity.
So we're going to do a little breakout room activity just to get you guys engaged and talking a little bit. So the question that we want you to think of and try to answer is, what do you personally think of when you hear the phrase soup kitchen? So what is the physical layout that comes to mind? Who goes there? Why do these people go there? So Tara is going to send you into breakout rooms. So if you could accept that invitation, that'd be great. I'm going to put the other questions that I just named in the chat just so you can reference back to them if you need while you're in your breakout rooms.
So you all received invitation. So when you're ready, accept that invitation. You have about 6 minutes in your breakout groups to discuss.
So does anybody want to share what their group talked about? Any takers on that?
I guess I'll share what my group talked about.
Great, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Genesis. So I was in a breakout room with Jess and I think someone named Colleen. I'm probably pronouncing your name wrong, but we kind of spoke about how prior to volunteering at a soup kitchen, we all had like these, we had our own ideas of what a soup kitchen was. For example, like it being a large kitchen and, you know, cooking with large pots and pans and cooking things in bulk. But after actually volunteering at soup kitchens, the idea kind of changed more to the understanding that a soup kitchen is not only a place where people get fed, but it's a place that has resources for the community. And at every soup kitchen, there may be different resources available based on what the community needs.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, definitely. I had a similar experience where growing up, I always thought a soup kitchen was a place where literally they made soup and served it. And then going to different places and seeing what actually happens, my opinion and my perception of them definitely changed. Does anybody else want to share? If not, we can move on.
In my breakout room, we talked about how I always used to, or I associate the term like soup kitchen with like a scene in the Kit Kittredge movie, which is like an American Girl doll movie, but it's just like very like, it's like during the Great Depression, it's like very like destitute place that like kind of has like bad connotation, don't want to be seen there. But going to places like Face to Face where it is so lively and so full of joy, like it just has a completely, you know, different view now in my head.
Thanks, Kate. So what if instead of asking you like what do you think of when you hear the phrase soup kitchen, what if we ask you what is a community kitchen? Do your thoughts or presumptions change at all? Who would go to a community kitchen? What would happen at a community kitchen that's different or similar to a soup kitchen? So here we're not going to go into breakout rooms. We just want to have like a large group discussion. So feel free to unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat if you don't want to talk. What are your thoughts? What is a community kitchen to you?
So my group talked about this actually a little bit. It kind of branched off from our initial conversation about the word soup kitchen, and we started talking about it. And I think like the majority of our conversation was just about the connotation that the two words carry and how they can look different, at least stereotypically, and that a community kitchen might sound like something that might have more of like a welcoming vibe, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. Anybody else have their thoughts or presumptions change when they hear the word community kitchen compared to soup kitchen, or do you think that they're the same thing? Any opinions there?
When I hear the two terms, I'm immediately transferred between the same concept but two different focuses. When you say soup kitchen, I'm more inclined to consider the food aspect. But when you say community kitchen, I'm more inclined to consider, you know, the aspect of the people that are involved, whether it be the volunteers from the community or the those that are seeking the services from the community.
Thanks, Sam. That was actually a good segue into our next slide.
So this is by no means a dictionary definition of community kitchen. This is one that we have coordinators have come up with due to our personal experiences, but yours might be different. So to us, a community kitchen is a place where physical needs are provided, such as food, hygiene products, and clothes. Community is fostered through meaningful conversation, friendships, and love that promotes the dignity and respect of each person. And it is a place that nourishes the body, the mind, and the soul. So has anyone here been to one of the service sites before, like face-to-face before? So now we can give a thumbs up, maybe. And if not, maybe you've been to like a different community kitchen. And what are your thoughts? Is this definition true in your experience? You just talk really about that.
I definitely agree that like this is a good definition for what a community kitchen would be like. In my group, we kind of did bring up the idea and the fact that, you know, at a soup kitchen, you don't just get a meal, how there's all different services offered to the community and the people that are coming. So this definitely like reflects just that. And Jess was saying how that sense of community and building relationships with the people that are coming for the service is so important and helps, you know, her feel rewarded after volunteering at the community kitchens or soup kitchens.
Yeah, definitely. I think community kitchen just implies, kind of as we've been discussing, a more holistic overview of the services provided. Anyone else have any thoughts?
I had the opportunity in the summer of 2019 to go with a few first-year students at LaSalle to a community kitchen in Camden, New Jersey. I think that Sam Vermette may have been a part of that group. And we actually had the opportunity to kind of sit there and watch as people kind of came in. They got to sit together at these long tables. There was tablecloths. It was a really dignified experience, and people were treated just like that, just like people. And I thought that was really exciting. They had great meals, or what I thought to be great meals. And then after the meal was over, they kind of walked around the different tables. There was community resources and representatives there. And in addition, they kind of got to go on these kind of like grocery shopping kind of experience where they picked up different kind of foods and vegetables and kind of put it in a bag and brought it with them on the way out. So they were kind of set for the week. And so I thought that was a really awesome community resource in the Camden area that we got to experience last summer.
Yeah, that's definitely awesome. That sounds like a really good experience.
I don't know how many of you guys have been to face-to-face. I think I may have mentioned this when I spoke before. But in my group, I had Becky, who is one of our representatives from face-to-face, but we were saying how much of a joyful place face-to-face is. You know, one of my favorite memories is there's one man who he comes and he is a gifted piano player and he sits in the back and plays piano. And like I remember him playing like All of Me by John Legend, somebody singing. And another time, one of the volunteers, an older woman, we had like a big group of volunteers that day, and everybody was like going through the rows of the two tables dancing. I learned how to waltz that day. So that last bullet point about a place that nourishes the mind, body, and soul, like I know, like I go and I feel better every time I come out of it. And I think that is especially, I mean, like in time from coronavirus, we all have felt a little bit of what it's like to be isolated. So especially people, you know, some of our older residents who come to face-to-face, like it is so, you know, important to have that aspect of community in these environments.
I think you make a really great point about especially that last bullet point. And like you said, in my personal experience, it's that, you know, we're being nourished too, the people that are serving, not just the people that are being served. So it's a dynamic relationship, I think. So yeah.
Would Becky or Tara from Face to Face maybe be willing to just share if you would consider Face to Face a community kitchen and what comes in your eyes, just because you work there and have a day-to-day lifestyle and a lot of experience working with it, even more so than us as coordinators.
Sure. Tara, are you, do you want to?
Yeah, go ahead, Becky, you can go.
Okay. Tara and I have done a couple, I guess 2 tag team Zoom calls with, so we're really good at it now. No, just kidding. You know, it's sadly, and in our last Zoom call, we were talking about this very thing and how face-to-face really is a community center where people come for needs, obviously, to be met. And it's so much more. People, you know, come as soon as we open, and you know, when we have to close, it's hard. It's hard for all of us, and especially in light of us not. I mean, we're open, but in a much different way. You know, we're doing meal distribution in the parking lot, and you know, obviously, we're all working really hard to provide what we can, but all of us, you know, the guests, the staff, the volunteers, just miss that community feel, that, you know, that warmth of the dining room. And as much as we are trying to make the parking lot as lovely as it can be, it's just different. It's, you know, I don't know if you know, and I won't go into too much detail, but right now we're just, we're doing a meal distribution. So guests are invited to come, and we distribute bags of fresh, like a fresh meal, and then also canned goods and toiletries. But we have to be careful. They socially distance. Everybody has masks on. So as you know, just being out in the world, it's the opposite in so many ways of what face-to-face is usually like. So we all feel that connection and that community missing, even as much as we're trying to foster it. It's you know, it's, so when we can go back, it'll be, I think we're going to be so ready for community. But Tara, I know you want to add stuff from your perspective.
You know, I think when you asked the question, Alexa, you know, and I said this earlier in the breakout group, if somebody asks me what I do, and, you know, it's my quick elevator speech, I'll be like, oh, I work in a soup kitchen. Then I'm like, oh, maybe what I really want to say, and I do say after thinking about it, if I have the second, you know, I work in a community center that has dining services and additional services, because as we were all saying, the soup kitchen doesn't capture, you know, the whole idea of the community. And I think face-to-face is much more of more focused on the community. I wouldn't say more focused, just as focused on community as it is on the food and everything else that we do. We are currently doing surveys right now for our guests, just to kind of see, it's part of what we do, how our guests kind of feel about us, what we can do better, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that everybody is missing through the few that we did yesterday was just that sense of community. So I'm just reiterating what we're all, you know, kind of saying, but it's really proof in the pudding that our guests really do miss that aspect of it.
Thank you both so much for sharing that. Yeah, I definitely think that food is not what makes these places continue to run. It's really the community and the friendships and the relationships and the love that's spread around that keeps the drive going within all of these organizations.
So with all this talk about the 2 different terms of community kitchen and soup kitchen, why do you think we should use the term community kitchen as opposed to soup kitchen? If anyone wants to just share some thoughts.
I personally think that this can change the entire mindset somebody has going into this like service of like a community kitchen or a soup kitchen. I think when you hear soup kitchen, it is very much this mindset of like, okay, I'm going to go like serve a meal, and that's, I think it's easy to like limit it there and have it end there. But community, at least for me, like the thought of community, it's you're going into somebody else's community, and you are going to find the needs of that community and just kind of immerse yourself within said community and whatever those needs may be. And maybe it is to serve a meal, maybe it is to have a conversation with somebody, maybe it is to go in the clothing room at Salle House, whatever it is. I just think that at least like the way I see it, I think it really changes the overall mindset when you're going into that place. Because I think it's easy to go in with this mindset of I'm here to serve you, and especially when we're talking about like soup kitchens, because it just I think those are the connotations naturally that come with it. Whereas I don't know, I think specifically of like Salle House, like I whenever I would go there, I don't know what I'm going to be doing today. I don't know what kind of conversations I'm going to be having today, but I'm just going to go and I'm excited to see what's going to happen. And that's the community building aspect of it, I think. So I don't know. I just think it's a lot of, it can really, I think it has, those words have power over our mindsets and the way we approach things and people and communities. So yeah.
I totally agree. I also think that going off what you said, Jesse, when you use the term soup kitchen, like you said, you know, you're going to serve. And I think it also becomes like, okay, I'm going to take 2 hours of my day. And for those 2 hours, I'm going to be at face-to-face, or I'm going to be at Salle, and then it's over. But when you use the term community kitchen, it kind of extends that and it makes it part of a bigger picture, and it develops a longer lasting relationship. So I know, like, for me, like, my experience and what I learned from Salle, it does not end every time I walk out the door. Like, I take those things home with me. And I think that by changing the way that we talk about it, that those things will continue for other people too.
Okay. So what other ways do you guys think that we can change the dialogue surrounding poverty, food insecurity, hunger, and community kitchens? Because as we know, they all kind of come with certain connotations. So if you guys have any other ideas or suggestions on how to change that, feel free to share.
Well, I was just thinking back because I know we either mentioned on a previous slide or we talked about at our cafe last year, specifically the difference between food insecurity and hunger. So, you know, hunger, I think Feeding America had in, you know, one of their reports that hunger is a physical feeling. So anyone can be hungry. It's those people who are food insecure, and knowing what food insecurity means and the fact that this can happen to anyone. Last year, we talked about how food insecurity can affect college students. And in one of our meetings, we talked about how, you know, older adults who may know, like, they don't have any, up until coronavirus, didn't have like a lot of financial burdens, but if they don't have, like, you know, people around them to buy them food, they could have been food insecure because of that. So just understanding what it is to be food insecure, and that it can happen to anyone, and that food insecure doesn't equal, you know, low income, doesn't equal homeless, and just, you know, thinking about the person and their circumstance, that these are, you know, two very separate things, and that circumstance, the status that they're in now, doesn't define them as a person. And I think that's why community kitchen is such an important term. And like Tara said, like, I also slip up and will say soup kitchen, and making conscious effort to use community kitchen more. But when we're saying soup kitchen, I think it kind of I kind of think of like the table between the people giving out meals and the people receiving. And it's these, you know, making the person the environment. But when we say community kitchen, it's this, it's a shared space. And I think it is very uplifting and, putting volunteers and the members on the same level, because they absolutely are, because we're all people, just because of, we're all going to the same place. So really, what difference is there? And if I highly, highly suggest that everyone, once we're in person at some point again, everybody come to Face to Face in Sarnelli and see for yourself, because I think all of us coordinators can attest to the wonderful, wonderful conversations and experiences we've had there. And again, just, not letting that current status a person is in define them as a person.
I'm just going to piggyback on what Kate said, if that's okay, just to kind of, once again, really reiterate, because I think we're all, we could be one paycheck away from being maybe in a community kitchen. And I think, over the past 7 months, we really have a lot of proof of that at Face to Face. We are seeing, and I think one of the slides alluded to this earlier, we are seeing so many new faces at Face to Face that we've never seen before. We are seeing a lot of people drive into Face to Face. We have never had cars in our parking lots before that are owned by the guests who come. So it's it's a whole different population that we are seeing right now. So it's true, Kate, what you're saying. We are really, anyone could be in the situation that they were not planning for. And it is so relevant right now in the pandemic.
Yeah, and even the fact that you guys, you're seeing new faces, like at Face to Face, I feel like everyone there, and a lot of people, even after maybe they don't need to come to Face for the dining resources anymore, they still come back and volunteer or say hi, because they do foster such close connections with everybody who volunteers there.
I want to expand on what Kate was talking about a little earlier, specifically the terms poverty, food insecurity, hunger, and we can even throw homelessness in there. I think personally for me, I've been trying to change the way that I talk about these terms, because I often hear a lot of people say oh, that person's poor, that person is food insecure, that person is hungry, that person is homeless. And when we do that, we really just put a label on that person and say that they're nothing more than their poorness or them being food insecure. But what I've been trying to do is change the way that I talk about them in saying that these people are experiencing poverty, or they're experiencing food insecurity, or they're experiencing homelessness, because that's really all it is. It's an experience. It's a situation that they're in right now that hopefully can be changed, but it doesn't label them as a person. So I hope that that's something that all of us can commit to doing, just because calling someone poor or food insecure and putting that label on them is not beneficial to them or to us in any way. So switching that dialogue from poor to somebody experiencing poverty is much more empowering, and gives them the ability to break out of that label that we once put on them.
I think that's such a good point, Alexa, and it kind of reminds me of what Kate was saying about the idea of the circumstance. And I think that's such an important word, because at the end of the day, we are all just products of circumstance, and your circumstance can change. Like you were saying, Tara, at any moment, your circumstance can change. And I think that when, like you were saying, Alexa, you define somebody and you restrict them to this label of poor, homeless, or hungry, we are consciously then choosing to define them by their negative circumstance. When you look at it on the flip side, I don't define myself by my privileged circumstance. So it's just kind of this interesting mind thought of why is it just easier to label somebody by a negative circumstance? And I just think that personally, I will definitely take your challenge and try and, break away from that restriction and those like labels. So yeah. Does anybody else have anything else on this question or no? Okay. Well, yeah, the next question, I feel like we kind of, why is it important to change the language we use surrounding these topics? I feel like we kind of talked about that a little bit, but if anybody has anything else, any thoughts that they're having or just anything they want to share, feel free.
This might be too academic, but I would wonder if we should discuss in the long term the causes of poverty, the causes of hunger, the causes of homelessness. I think Pope Francis, maybe about a year ago, said quite bluntly that the world economic, social, and political systems are unjust. Why is it there are so many people hungry? Why such a big difference between rich nations and poor nations? And even within, like the US, a very rich nation materially, there's a big gap between the rich and the poor, or even between the middle class and the poor. And, what are the causes of these situations? Can we change them? Maybe that's something to discuss later on, but I throw it out.
Thanks, Joe. That question has to do with how countries, like specifically America, and how we view food and food insecurity and hunger. Sort of what we talked about last year in the Explorer Cafe. In the United States, we don't recognize food as a right. It's a privilege. Some people have it and some people don't. So that's really something that we all as educated individuals need to work on. How can we make sure that food becomes a right in this world that we live? Because no person should live experiencing food insecurity or experiencing hunger.
Yes.
Do we have any other thoughts for this slide? If not, we can move on. Just want to ask.
Okay. So, what are some takeaways that you guys have from today? What, anything that's stuck with you, or, just any parting thoughts before we, wrap everything?
And again, you can put this in the chat. You don't necessarily have to unmute. You could just like type a little something of like what you're gonna take away from this conversation, because we as coordinators all think it's really important that when we have these types of conversations, something should stick with you and you should use that moving forward.
I just wanted to point out in the chat, Tara mentioned that it's very similar from moving, language when talking about slavery from slave to enslaved person. And that kind of, sparked my brain about saying somebody, was jailed or prisoner to someone who is incarcerated. And I think just in general, walking away from this, being mindful about the language we use to describe people. And like we were saying, that anyone can be one paycheck away from being in a community kitchen. That at, what Jesse said, we are the product of our circumstances. I absolutely love that. But I think, we were talking about community kitchens being a place of fostering that respects dignity of persons. And, that community kitchen setting isn't one that's just based on location. It's something you take with you after walking away. And I always kind of say, like, our main goals with PHEED is then once you leave PHEED, like, how are you treating people afterwards? So even though, like, you know, we can't do much in person, like, walking away from this and just kind of taking all of this information and thinking how you're talking about people and how you're treating people, and emphasis on, you know, uplifting and empowering conversations.
Thanks, Kate.
Okay, so just to close out, if anyone is interested in getting involved with PHEED right now, we are currently partnering with Student Affairs to host a drive to benefit our community partners, so Face to Face and Sarnelli House. So we're collecting clothing, warm clothing, gloves, hats, socks, scarves, and jackets, as well as, you know, like toiletries and hygiene products and any non-perishable food items. So we have drop boxes located all around campus in Connolly Library, the Union, the Good Shepherd Building, which is the public safety headquarters, St. Miguel lobby for the St. Miguel students living there. And if you live in Worcester Apartments, you can contact Alexa or Kate to drop them off there. And in addition, we have an email right here. So if you want to join our email list, you can do that. That way you get all our emails. And we also have an Instagram at LaSalle PHEED if you're on Instagram. So yeah.
So that's all that we have for all of you today. Before we end, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask us or any final comments?
And thank you to everybody who's been typing in the chat also. I know I've been having it open, making sure I'm reading all of them. So thank you for still being engaged, even if you can't, you know, talk wherever you are.
Okay, thank you all so much for being here and engaging in this conversation with us. We really hope that you'll take everything that we laid out in front of you, absorb it, use it in your life, hopefully, and please join us through PHEED Philly. Join our email list, follow us on Instagram. We love to have new volunteers. We'd love it if you could get involved. And also thank you to Tara for letting us host this cafe.
Thank you to the group. I'm sure, you know, round of applause for you all, and for our guests too from Face to Face. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we'll keep this space open for a couple more minutes if anyone wants to socialize or touch base. But thank you so much for coming today.